on September 23, 1838, Victoria lived in poverty. Early on, her father marketed Victoria and her sisters as healers who could communicate with the dead. In this way, Victoria and her sisters became breadwinners for their family. Victoria married at 15 to Dr. Canning Woodhull, who was 28 at the time. Dr. Canning Woodhull was an alcoholic who spent his time in taverns and brothels. Victoria was left to fend for herself. She worked jobs as a cigar store clerk, actress, and seamstress. Victoria later divorced Dr. Canning Woodhull. It was the lashback she received that motivated her to start the free love movement. The free love movement aimed to destigmatize divorce and help women escape abusive marriages. In 1868, Victoria Woodhull moved to New York City, New York. In her visit, she became acquainted with Cornelius Vanderbilt, who had been recently widowed and sought her healing services. Working as healers, Victoria and her sister collected tips and built a fund of almost $700,000 within 6 weeks. In January 1870, Woodhull and her sister Tenny became the first women to operate a brokerage firm on Wall Street. The firm was called Woodhull, Claflin and Company. However, the press characterized them as the bewitching brokers. Victoria had hoped to use the money made from the brokerage firm to create a platform where she could advocate for women's rights, laborers, and the poor. Using the funds accumulated from her brokerage firm, Victoria published her newspaper, Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly. It was here she promoted the free love movement, women's suffrage, sex education, birth control, and licensed prostitution. In 1871, she gave a speech in Steinway Hall, New York, declaring, "To a woman, by nature, belongs the right of sexual determination. When the instinct is aroused in her, then, and only then, should commerce follow. When woman rises from sexual slavery to sexual freedom and to the ownership and control of her sexual organs, and man is obliged to respect this freedom, then will this instinct become pure and holy. Then will woman be raised from the iniquity and morbidness in which she now wallows for existence, and the intensity and glory of her creative functions be increased 100-fold." While Victoria planned to attend the National Women's Suffrage Association's 1871 convention in D.C., she was unable to. Rather, she was lobbying Congressman Benjamin Butler of Massachusetts about women's suffrage and appealed the recent defeat of the 16th Amendment, which would have granted women's suffrage. Congressman Benjamin Butler of Massachusetts was one of the amendment's supporters. Butler offered Victoria a position on the Judiciary Committee, which she took, and Victoria became the first woman to directly address the Congressional Committee. In 1872, Victoria Woodhull became the first woman to run for president alongside Frederick Douglass, her running mate. At the time, women were not even allowed to vote. While Ulysses Grant won the election, Victoria Woodhull is undoubtedly a pioneer of women's rights. Her legacy carried on to advance the women's suffrage movement and women's rights.